We took the motor off the lathe bed in an earlier video, and because you can't actually access the terminal box when the headstock's in place, we had to take the headstock off first, and it proved easiest to disconnect the wires at the motor end rather than inside the electrical cabinet. Right. Well, maybe we'll just leave it like that for the meantime. Well, this is the main motor out of the Harrison M300. It's pretty dirty on the outside. A load of swarf in there. Sounds perfectly smooth, and there's no real slop in it, so I think the bearings are okay. That's the main info plate. I'm not sure this is going to work because they're right on the edge of this. No, it's not going to work. Right, here's a different one, seems to fit on a bit better. Haven't shifted at all. All that's happened is that we've come off axis. I used to have this Sykes Pickavant hydraulic bearing puller kit, which I used when I was playing about with Range Rover gearboxes and engines. But I see that I sold it in 2016, and it would cost me about £340 to buy it again. So there you are, never sell anything useful. Right, it's coming now. It's just coming now. Actually, it's not a woodruff key. It's just a straight key. But in any event, we don't want to lose it. I'll just take the mounting plate off. While we're about it, Now just remember that this bolt which mounts this mounting plate onto the lathe has to be put in before we put this back on. It doesn't seem to be in the right exactly orientation at the moment. So there's the base without the mounting plate on it. Probably a good idea to put these 4 bolts in place before you try and bolt this mounting plate back on there. Well, I've got to clean that up in a minute. Looks as if it could do with a good clean. That rubbing noise is just the other end of the spindle rubbing on the piece of paper I've got on down here. Well, I think there's a roll pin in here securing this plastic fan, so hopefully it will come out easily. Right. I think it would come off if we sort of levered it from both sides. Yes. Good. Now, do you suppose we can get this spindle out without having to press anything? Or should I just leave it on whilst I clean this outside? I think I'll try and clean the outside a bit with everything in place. Well, I'm not quite sure what the right solvent for cleaning electric motors is, because if the solvent gets inside, I don't want it to dissolve the insulation on the windings. I'm pretty sure this copper wire is insulated with shellac, so I thought I'd take a couple of bits of it and test various solvents to see which ones get rid of the shellac before applying it to the outside of this motor. Well, that's odd, because neither petrol nor acetone had any effect on this, what I presume is shellac, despite my having read that both of them would dissolve it. So I think I'm safe to use petrol carefully. This could take some time. This is very much ingrained on dirt, which I'm having to get off in the most tedious manual methods. Thank God I don't have to use a weaker solvent than petrol, because petrol usually brings most stuff off fairly easily.
Many hours later.
Well, I've got it reasonably clean now, and there's no give in the bushes, and it feels smooth. However, this one possibly sounds okay. I don't know what the funny rattling inside is. It's something is hitting something. I don't think it was when it was running properly. I think I'll have to take them apart and look at them. I wonder if the rotor is touching something. Well, I've got this almost clean. There are all kinds of nooks and crannies that I can't kind of reach. This is the back end of it where the fan is. It's got a plate with 3 screws that I could take off and 3 bolts that I could take off and 2 screws here. I don't know what these secure, and I'm not going to undo them and risk something falling off inside. So I thought I would take off the front end and see what happens. Well, that's got the bolts undone. There's a kind of slot here which I can lever. I don't know whether it's supposed to come off or not. Got to be able to get into this somehow. I'm not damaging anything. Sounds better. Part of it is coming out. That's it. Right, well, so the outer race of the bearing comes out of the housing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that bearing. So if I wanted to get the shaft out of here, what do I do? Do I bash the other end? Do I undo these bolts? Do I undo these screws? I don't know. Well, I'm thinking if I undo these 3, maybe the whole thing comes out that way, and then we can see what these are doing on the other side. Come in the end. Do you think this whole thing will come out? If I do this? Yes. Right, so Those two screws just retain the outer race of this bearing in the housing. That's completely clean. There's nothing wrong with it at all. And that's the other side. The rotor is also in wonderful condition. Usually you can feel if a bearing is not right. It feels perfectly okay. I just don't know why it was making slightly odd noises. And then this one feels equally satisfactory. Probably best just leave them alone, put them back together again and leave it alone. Really quite a lot of grease has come out of the bearing on both sides. I've wiped it off this side. I'm wondering if I should leave it alone or if I should try and lever up this plate in order to repack the bearing with grease. What do you think? I don't know. To me it seems perfectly okay, but on the other hand it was making a slightly odd noise when I listened to it from the outside. This bearing says 6205-2Z/MT62B, Sweden. And it also says SKF. So the coil winding resistance is 7.1 ohms, 7.1 ohms, 7.1 ohms. Yeah, that seems fine. And the insulation resistance between the windings and the case is considerably greater than 200 megohms. So that is absolutely fine. Yeah. Just in case you think the thing isn't working, it's calibrated correctly. I was just looking at these rubber mounts for the motor. You've got this metal shell and the rubber hardly sticks out of it at all, so that when it's bolted down, probably the rubber is performing no useful function, I'm thinking. It's quite hard, but still flexible. I think if these are to perform any useful function, they should stick out further, and possibly they just got squashed through age, and maybe it would be a good idea for me to replace these, just to give a little more compliant mounting. I've just been cleaning off this fan with gunk, and you can see that it's got paint on it. So I guess that Harrison must have installed the motor and then just spray painted the whole lathe, including this cowl and the fan behind it. Not sure that's a terribly good way of doing things, but still, there we go. Well, in the end, I thought this motor is 35 years old, so surely it deserves new bearings. I can get replacement SKF bearings with the same type code 6205-2Z for £15. So that's what I'm going to do. The only problem is that I could not get them with the /MT62B on the end. That is a code for the kind of grease that the bearing contains, and it doesn't seem to be currently supplied by SKF. So I consulted my bearing supplier and they said, well, probably the ones we've got will do. So we'll hope for the best on that. I don't have the right type of bearing puller for this. This is probably going to destroy this bearing if it works at all, but it's what I've got, so we'll just have to see if we can do it. This way. Okay, rather gave the impression that it might have some Loctite on it. I don't know. Hasn't done it too much harm. Don't like xylene. Right, so the new bearing seemed to me to slip on. Oh no, right, so it's going to go down okay. Well, I haven't even started putting you on. Don't behave like that. Thank you. Well, I'll cool this down before attempting to put that on. We'll take the other one, the bottom one, off. Well, I've taken this one off. These screws, you just rotate them through 180 degrees and it moves this cap out of the way, and then you can just sort of bash it off. What's interesting about it is all this grease disposed like that above the bearing, and there was some below the bearing earlier before I wiped it off. So I'm inclined to think that that has kind of oozed out of the bearing maybe when it got hot or something. I don't know. We'll have a look inside the bearings later. See if this one will come off as easily as the other one. Yes. Actually, slightly easier, I think. Well, maybe not. Definitely not as easily. If only I had my hydraulic puller, which I stupidly sold on eBay. Why did I do that? It had the right cups for going under here, and you just twiddle it and it comes up. Don't ever sell hydraulic pullers because you will need them later. That's my theory anyway. The trouble is it's going over at an angle now, isn't it? Which is problematic. Yeah, it's not going to achieve anything. No. Right. Heat. Or can we do this at a slightly different, on a different side of it. Rather doubt it. No, it's just going to go over again. You rat. It's just going to go over sideways, isn't it? Yes. Whatever I do, it's going to go over sideways. Is there a circlip on it? Is there a moron in the house? Is there a moron in the house? Yes. Bloody hell. This bearing is secured by means of a circlip. Because there was no circlip on the other one, I just didn't think about that. Which I suppose is more or less normal for me. Probably completely loose as soon as I remove that circlip. I think he's going to come off easy peasy. No problem at all. When you use your brains. Right, so this is the old bearing. I was just wondering if I could get this metal side piece off so that I can see the state of the grease in this thing. It's not that. No, all we do is break the blade. So if I were to drill it wherever it will drill, like that. You can get it out. Well, the grease that came out of it has definitely come out of the bearing. Whether it spun out as soon as it was installed or not, I don't know. And this grease is somewhat dry. And of course I've buggered the bearing now anyway with all this pulling, so we can't really compare it. But yes, I think it was a good idea to replace the bearings. Probably I could just tap the new bearings on with a hammer anyway, but just for belt and braces I'm going to put this in the freezer whilst I'm at lunch, and then we'll see what's what. Well, I put the bearings in the oven at something between 60 and 100 degrees C. I'm sure the grease is rated for more than that. And I'm ready to take them out now and see if they'll, I hope they'll just slip on. Come out of there. I'll see if I can do both of them at once. Yeah. Where's the bloody knife? Yes. We'll just let that warm up and naturalise. What do I mean? Equalise. We'll let the temperatures equalise. I put a new circlip on there because the old one was too distorted. I'm not quite sure how I'm supposed to reinstall these, but I thought that I would at least get this going. Hopefully, like this. I should like to see that this is not really what I like doing, but we're not really applying much force. I wonder, of course I can't see whether it's fully seated or not, can I? All we know is that when we put this in the motor and do up the 3 bolts at each end, it's going to squash it together okay, isn't it? So I'll just so it's quite secure anyway. Right, well this one goes in this orientation, and then we just put the 3 bolts back in. Right, now this one goes on with this expanding washer. Like that. Now, so I can't get it on enough to engage the bolt yet. I don't know if I can just do this gently. I think we can probably get the bolt in now. Right, I've got all 3 bolts in. And I'm just going to do them up cyclically. I had to apply quite a lot of force to get them off, so we don't know what the manufacturer's spec is. I think that'll have to do. So now it's completely silent rotating. On the other hand, it doesn't rotate quite so easily as it did before. Because before I could set it going and it would run on for some while. So that's the front one, and that's the back one. Right, so fan goes on here, I think. Might do it. So the cowl is now nice and clean, and I presume it goes like that. Alright, so I suppose this goes about there, I think. So this goes well, I had to do a bit of fettling with that to get the pulley to go back on, but I think it's going to go now. Not quite sure how far on it should go. Say a tweedle bit more. That looks about right. Right, that's it. Ready for reinstallation.